The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the modest ranch house, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the Wyoming sky in shades of crimson and gold. And Samuel Yates knew without question that his life was about to change forever. He had been mending fence posts near the main road when he heard the drivers shout, and the thunder of hooves approaching faster than usual. Samuel dropped his tools and jogged toward the house, his boots kicking up dust with each stride. The stagecoach door swung open before he reached it, and the driver, old Pete Morrison, climbed down with an expression that mixed concern and urgency. "Got your mail-order bride here, Sam," Pete said, jerking his thumb toward the coach. "But I think you better get her inside quick. She's been sick most of the journey from Cheyenne, and the last stretch from Fort Bridger nearly did her in." Samuel's heart hammered in his chest. He had written to the matrimonial agency 6 months ago, desperate for companionship in this isolated corner of Wyoming territory. The year was 1876, and life out here was hard for a man alone. He had received a single letter from Zara Gallagher, a woman from Boston who said she was seeking a fresh start after her family had fallen on hard times. Her words had been careful and polite, painting a picture of a practical woman who understood the realities of frontier life. He had sent money for her passage and waited with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Now, as he approached the coach, Samuel caught his first glimpse of her. Zara sat slumped against the worn leather seat, her face pale as moonlight and her dark hair falling in disheveled waves from beneath a simple bonnet. Her traveling dress was dusty and wrinkled, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. She tried to lift her head when she saw him, attempted what might have been a smile, but it faded almost immediately. "Miss Gallagher," Samuel said softly, stepping closer. "I am Samuel Yates. Can you stand?" Zara's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyelids fluttered, and Samuel realized she was moments from collapsing entirely. Without hesitation, he reached into the coach and slid one arm beneath her knees and another around her back. She weighed almost nothing, he thought with alarm, as he lifted her against his chest. Her head lolled against his shoulder, and he could feel the heat radiating from her skin through the fabric of her dress. "Fever," Pete said unnecessarily, handing down a worn carpet bag and a small trunk. "Started up yesterday, according to the station master at Fort Bridger. I would have taken her to the dock in town, but she kept saying she needed to get here to her intended. Stubborn as they come, this one." Samuel adjusted his grip on Zara, cradling her more securely. "Thank you for bringing her safely, Pete. I will take care of her now." The driver nodded, clearly relieved to have delivered his passenger. "Good luck to you both," he called as he climbed back onto the coach. Within moments, the stagecoach was rolling away, leaving Samuel standing in the settling dust with an unconscious woman in his arms. Samuel turned and strode toward the house, his mind racing. He kicked open the door and carried Zara inside, grateful that he had spent the previous week cleaning and preparing for her arrival. The main room was simple but tidy, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table, and chairs he had made himself. To the left was the bedroom, which he had given over entirely to his soon-to-be wife, planning to sleep in the small room he used for storage. He shouldered open the bedroom door and laid Zara gently on the bed. She stirred slightly, her eyes opening to narrow slits. "I am sorry," she whispered hoarsely. "I wanted to make a better impression." "Hush now," Samuel said, surprised by the tenderness in his own voice. He barely knew this woman, yet seeing her so vulnerable stirred something protective within him. "Rest now. You are home." The words seemed to comfort her. Zara's eyes closed again, and her breathing evened out slightly. Samuel stood for a moment, looking down at her, trying to reconcile the frail figure before him with the composed letters he had received. Then he shook himself into action. Fever needed tending, not staring. He fetched cool water from the pump outside and clean cloths from the chest where he kept linens. Back in the bedroom, he hesitated before carefully removing Zara's bonnet and the outer layer of her traveling dress, leaving her in her chemise and petticoats. It felt improper, but practicality won over propriety. He could not let modesty prevent him from helping her recover. Samuel dipped a cloth in the cool water and pressed it gently to her forehead. Zara sighed, some of the tension leaving her face. He continued this way for several minutes, cooling her burning skin, changing the cloths as they warmed. As he worked, he studied her features more carefully. She was younger than he had imagined, perhaps 23 or 24 to his 28 years. Her face, even in illness, held a refined beauty that spoke of her Eastern upbringing. Her hands, resting on the quilt, were long-fingered and elegant, though he noticed calluses that suggested she had not lived a life of complete leisure. As the evening deepened into night, Samuel kept his vigil. He brought in her bags, stoked the fire in the main room, and prepared a simple broth from beef bones and vegetables, hoping she might wake enough to take some nourishment. Every hour he checked on her, changed the cooling cloths, and murmured words of encouragement even though she could not hear him. Near midnight, Zara's fever broke. Samuel had dozed in the chair beside her bed, jerking awake when he heard her move. Her eyes opened, clearer now, and found him immediately. "You are really him," she said, her voice still weak but steadier. "Samuel Yates." "I am," he confirmed, leaning forward. "And you are Zara Gallagher, though I confess this was not quite the meeting I had envisioned." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Nor I. I wanted to arrive composed and capable to show you that you had not made a mistake in sending for me. Instead, I arrive half dead and completely useless." "You are not useless," Samuel said firmly. "You are ill, and that is nothing to apologize for. The journey from Boston is long and hard. Many would not have survived it in good health, let alone while fighting off sickness." Zara turned her face away slightly, and Samuel saw moisture gleaming in her eyes. "You do not know me," she said quietly. "You may still regret this arrangement once you do." Samuel reached out and gently turned her face back toward him, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle against her chin. "Then we will learn each other," he said. "That is what this is for, is it not? A chance for two people to build something together. I do not expect perfection, Zara. I expect only honesty and effort. Can you give me those things?" She searched his face, and something in her expression softened. "Yes," she whispered. "I can promise that." "Then that is enough for now," Samuel said. He reached for the bowl of broth he had kept warm by the fire. "Do you think you could take some of this? You need strength." Zara nodded, and Samuel helped her sit up, propping pillows behind her back. She took the bowl with trembling hands, and he watched as she sipped slowly, color gradually returning to her cheeks. When she had finished half the bowl, she handed it back, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. "Sleep now," Samuel urged, easing her back down onto the pillows. "Everything else can wait until you are stronger." "Will you tell me about this place?" Zara asked, her eyes already drifting closed. "About what my new home is like." Samuel settled back in his chair, keeping his voice low and soothing. "We are about 15 miles south of Fort Bridger, Wyoming territory. The ranch is small but mine. Bought with money I saved working cattle drives for 10 years. I have 100 acres, 30 head of cattle, a few horses, and chickens. The land is beautiful in its way, wild and open. The mountains rise to the east, and the sky seems to go on forever. It is hard work, but honest work. The winters are brutal, but the summers make up for it." He continued talking. describing the nearby creek where willows grew, the meadow where wildflowers bloomed in spring, the way the stars looked at night without city lights to dim them. Zara's breathing had deepened into sleep before he finished, but he kept talking anyway, as much to settle his own racing thoughts as anything else. When he finally rose and returned to the main room, Samuel stood at the window and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere out there, coyotes called to each other, and the wind whispered through the grass. He had lived alone for so long that the house had become merely a place to sleep and eat between long days of work. Now, with Zara sleeping in the next room, it felt different. It felt like what he had always hoped it might become, a home. The next morning, Samuel woke early as was his habit. He tended the animals first, feeding the horses and chickens, checking on the cattle in the near pasture. The work was familiar and grounding, giving him time to think about how his life had just shifted on its axis. When he returned to the house, he found Zara awake and attempting to get out of bed. "Whoa there," he said quickly, crossing the room to steady her as she swayed. "You are not strong enough yet. I cannot just lie in bed while you do everything," Zara protested, but her grip on his arm was tight, betraying her weakness. "I am supposed to be your wife to help with the household, to earn my place here." "Your place is already earned by virtue of the courage it took to come here," Samuel said. He guided her back to sit on the edge of the bed. "Besides, we are not married yet. That can wait until you are well enough to stand through the ceremony without fainting." Zara looked up at him with surprising intensity. "You still want to marry me then? Even after seeing me like this?" Samuel crouched down so they were at eye level. "Zara, I asked for a partner, not a servant. Yes, I want to marry you. I want the chance to know you, to build a life together. Your being ill does not change that. If anything, it tells me you have determination. Pete said you insisted on coming here rather than staying at Fort Bridger. That takes grit." A blush colored Zara's pale cheeks. "I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid that if I delayed, you would change your mind. That I would be stranded in a strange place with no money and no prospects." "I would not have done that," Samuel said gently. "But I understand the fear. You have given up everything familiar to come here. That must have taken tremendous faith." "Or tremendous desperation," Zara said with a hint of self-deprecating humor. Samuel smiled. "Perhaps a bit of both. Now let me get you some breakfast. Do you think you could manage some eggs and toast?" Zara nodded, and Samuel left her to prepare the meal. As he cooked, he found himself thinking about what little he knew of her circumstances. Her letters had mentioned that her father, a merchant, had died 2 years ago, leaving debts that consumed everything. Her mother had passed when Zara was young. She had a brother who had gone west seeking gold and had not been heard from since. Left alone and nearly penniless, she had turned to the matrimonial agency as her best option for survival. When he brought the food to her, Zara ate with more appetite than the night before, another good sign. As she ate, Samuel told her more about the ranch and the rhythms of life here. She listened intently, asking intelligent questions that showed she was genuinely trying to understand her new world. "There is a woman, Martha Collins, who lives on the neighboring ranch about 5 miles east," Samuel said. "She is married to Tom Collins and they have 3 children. Martha is kind and would be happy to help you settle in, teach you what you need to know about living out here. I thought, once you are feeling better, we might ride over and visit them." "That would be wonderful," Zara said. "I confess, I worried about the isolation. I am not afraid of hard work or loneliness, but it is comforting to know there are other women nearby." "It is not Boston," Samuel said carefully. "The society here is small and rough around the edges, but the people are good for the most part. They look out for one another because we have to. Survival depends on it. Over the following days, Zara's strength gradually returned. Samuel maintained a respectful distance, sleeping in the storage room and giving her space to recover and adjust. He brought her meals, changed her linens, and kept the fire going while managing the ranch work during the day. In the evenings, they talked. Those conversations became the foundation of their relationship. Zara spoke of her childhood in Boston, the daughter of a once prosperous merchant who had made poor investments. She described her love of reading, her education at a women's academy, and the abrupt end to that life when her father died. There was pain in her stories, but also resilience. Samuel, in turn, shared his own history. He had grown up on a small farm in Missouri, the youngest of 5 children. When his parents died of cholera, he had gone west at 18, working as a cowhand and learning the cattle business from the ground up. He had saved every penny, dreaming of owning his own land. 5 years ago, he had made that dream real, buying this property and building the house with his own hands. "Why did you want a wife?" Zara asked one evening as they sat at the table after supper. She had been well enough to sit with him for meals for the past 2 days, though she still tired easily. "You seem entirely capable of managing on your own." Samuel considered the question, wanting to answer honestly. "I am capable," he agreed, "but capable and content are not the same thing. I found myself working from dawn until dark, falling into bed exhausted and waking up to do it all again. The ranch was thriving, but I was just surviving. I wanted more. I wanted someone to share it with, someone to build toward a future with. Children, maybe, someday. A full life, not just a functional one." Zara was quiet for a moment, tracing patterns on the wooden table with her finger. "I was afraid you would only want me for work," she said softly, "that I would be little more than an unpaid servant and a vessel for bearing children." Samuel reached across the table and covered her hand with his. It was the most deliberate touch between them since that first night when he had carried her inside. "I will not lie and say I do not hope for those things, for your help with the household and for children eventually. But I want them to come from genuine partnership, not obligation. I want us to care for each other, Zara. I want this to be a real marriage, not just a business arrangement." She turned her hand under his, their palms meeting. "I want that too," she said, meeting his eyes. "More than I can express." The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Zara yawned despite herself and Samuel chuckled, breaking the tension. "Bed for you," he said. "You are still recovering." "I am feeling much better," Zara insisted, but she did not argue when Samuel helped her to her room. At the doorway, she paused and turned back to him. "Samuel, thank you for everything, for your kindness and patience, for carrying me inside that first night and telling me I was home. I do not think I properly thanked you." "You do not need to thank me for basic decency," Samuel said, but his voice was warm. "Sleep well, Zara." A week after Zara's arrival, Samuel decided she was well enough for the ride to the Collins ranch. It would be good for her to meet Martha, and he suspected that female company would do more for Zara's spirits than anything he could provide. He saddled his horse, Ranger, and brought out a gentler mare named Rosie for Zara. "Have you ridden much?" he asked as he led the horses to the porch where Zara waited, dressed in a simple calico dress she had unpacked from her trunk. "Some when I was younger," Zara said, eyeing the mare with a mixture of interest and apprehension. "But it has been years." "Rosie is gentle," Samuel assured her. "Just hold the reins steady and let her follow Ranger. She knows the way." He helped Zara mount, his hands at her waist, steadying her as she settled into the saddle. She was still thinner than she should be, but color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes were bright and clear. The morning sun caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair, and Samuel found himself staring before he caught himself, and turned to his own horse. The ride to the Collins ranch took them across open grassland, dotted with sage and wildflowers. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. Zara sat her horse well enough, though Samuel could see her concentrating on keeping her seat. They rode in comfortable silence, disturbed only by the wind and the call of a hawk overhead. "It is beautiful," Zara said after a while. "Lonely but beautiful. I can see why you love it." "It gets in your blood," Samuel agreed. "The space, the freedom. I could never go back east now. I would feel caged." When they reached the Collins ranch, Martha came out to meet them, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a round, pleasant woman in her mid-30s with a welcoming smile and shrewd eyes that took in everything. "Sam Yates, you brought her at last," Martha exclaimed. "I was beginning to think you were hiding her away." She turned to Zara with genuine warmth. "Welcome, my dear. I am Martha Collins. Please come in, come in. Tom is out with the cattle, but the children will be thrilled to meet you." Over the next few hours, Zara and Martha sat in the Collins kitchen while Martha's 3 children, ranging from 5 to 12, eyed the newcomer with curious respect. Martha plied Zara with coffee and fresh bread, asking gentle questions about her journey and her plans. Samuel could see Zara gradually relaxing, the tension leaving her shoulders as she found genuine friendship in Martha's straightforward manner. "When is the wedding?" Martha asked bluntly. "Or are you two planning to keep up the pretense of propriety forever?" Zara blushed, and Samuel cleared his throat. "We thought we would wait until Zara was fully recovered. We have not yet discussed the details." "Well, discuss them soon," Martha said firmly. "People will talk otherwise, you know how they are." "The preacher, Reverend Stone, comes through Fort Bridger every 2 weeks. He will be there this Sunday. You should get the thing done proper." Later, as they rode back home, Zara was thoughtful. "Martha is right," she said finally. "We should marry soon." "I do not want to cause gossip or damage your reputation." "What about your feelings on the matter?" Samuel asked. "We have known each other barely more than a week." Zara smiled slightly. "We have known each other through letters for months before that. And this past week, living in your home, seeing how you carry yourself, how you treat me and even the animals, I have learned more about your character than months of formal courtship could have revealed. You are a good man, Samuel Yates. If you are willing to take a chance on me, then I am willing to take a chance on us." Samuel felt something warm expand in his chest. "Then we will ride to Fort Bridger on Sunday and find Reverend Stone." The rest of the week passed in a strange mixture of domesticity and anticipation. Zara insisted on taking over the household tasks, learning to cook on the wood stove and manage the chickens. She was unpracticed but determined, and Samuel found himself charmed by her persistence even when the biscuits came out burned or the butter would not set properly. In the evenings, they continued their conversations, growing more comfortable with each other. Samuel found himself looking forward to coming in from the day's work, knowing Zara would be there. They had not touched beyond practical necessity, both maintaining a careful propriety, but the attraction between them was undeniable. Samuel caught himself watching the way lamplight played over Zara's features, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. And he noticed the way her eyes followed him when she thought he was not looking. Sunday arrived bright and clear. They dressed in their best clothes. Samuel wore his only suit, brushed clean of dust and mothballs. Zara appeared in a dress of deep blue that brought out the color of her eyes, her hair pinned up in a style that made her look both elegant and touchingly young. "You are beautiful," Samuel said, the words escaping before he could think better of them. Zara's cheeks flushed with pleasure. "Thank you, you look very handsome yourself." The ride to Fort Bridger took over an hour. The town was small, consisting of a trading post, a saloon, a general store, and a few other buildings clustered around what passed for a main street. People moved about their Sunday business, dressed in their church clothes. Samuel tied the horses outside the small church building and helped Zara down, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Inside, they found Reverend Stone preparing for the service. He was an older man with kind eyes and a weathered face that spoke of years on the frontier. When Samuel explained their purpose, the Reverend smiled. "I would be happy to perform the ceremony," he said. "Do you have witnesses?" "We can find some," Samuel said, but before he could go looking, Martha bustled in with her husband Tom in tow. "Did you think we would let you do this without us?" Martha scolded affectionately. "We saw your horses outside and figured you were making honest people of yourselves today." With Martha and Tom as witnesses, the ceremony was simple and brief. Samuel and Zara stood before Reverend Stone, speaking the vows that would bind their lives together. Samuel's voice was steady as he promised to love, honor, and cherish Zara for all their days. Zara's voice wavered slightly with emotion but grew stronger as she made her own promises. When Reverend Stone pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel cupped Zara's face gently in his hands and kissed her for the first time. It was a soft, sweet kiss, full of promise and new beginning. When they parted, Zara's eyes were shining with tears, and Samuel felt his own throat tight with unexpected emotion. They signed the marriage register, Martha and Tom adding their names as witnesses. Martha hugged Zara fiercely. "Be happy, dear girl," she whispered. "You have found a good man." The ride home felt different. The careful distance between them had dissolved with their vows. Zara rode closer to Samuel, and when they stopped to water the horses at a creek halfway home, Samuel helped her down and pulled her into his arms. "My wife," he murmured against her hair. "My husband," Zara responded, her arms wrapping around his waist. They stood that way for a long moment, the horses drinking peacefully beside them, the Wyoming sun warm on their shoulders. Samuel felt a rightness settle into his bones. This woman, who had arrived exhausted and half dead just 2 weeks ago, had somehow become essential to him in that short time. When they reached the ranch as the sun was setting, Samuel dismounted and then lifted Zara down, but instead of setting her on her feet, he swept her up into his arms as he had that first night. "Samuel," she laughed, startled. "I am not ill anymore. I can walk." "I know," he said, carrying her toward the house. "But tradition says I should carry my bride over the threshold, and I find I like having you in my arms." He shouldered open the door and carried her inside, setting her down gently in the main room. The house was dim in the fading light, and Samuel moved to light the lamps. When he turned back, Zara was watching him with an expression that was equal parts nervous and hopeful. "I am frightened," she admitted softly. "Not of you, but of disappointing you, of not being what you need." Samuel crossed to her and took both her hands in his. "I have the same fears," he confessed. "I am just a rough cowboy, Zara. I do not have smooth manners or fine words, but I promise you this. I will do everything in my power to make you happy, to build a good life for us. And I will never ask you to be anything other than yourself." Zara reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling slightly. "How did I get so fortunate? I thought I was coming here out of desperation, but I found something I never expected." "What is that?" Samuel asked, though he thought he knew. "Hope," Zara said, "and maybe the beginning of love." Samuel kissed her again, deeper this time, and felt her respond with growing confidence. When they finally drew apart, both breathless, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "Only the beginning?" he asked with gentle humor. Zara smiled. "Well, we have only known each other 2 weeks. I thought it might be too soon to say more." Time is strange out here, Samuel said. Sometimes 2 weeks can feel like forever, and sometimes 10 years pass in a blink. What I feel for you, Zara, it is more than I expected so soon, but it is real and growing stronger every day. Then let us continue growing it together, Zara said, and kissed him again. That night they truly became husband and wife in every sense. Samuel was gentle and patient, and Zara met him with trust and growing passion. Afterward, they lay entwined in the bed that had been Zara's sickbed and now became their marriage bed, talking quietly until sleep claimed them both. The weeks that followed established the rhythms of their married life. Zara took to frontier living with determination, learning from Martha and from her own mistakes. She learned to bake proper bread, to tend the garden she planted behind the house, to preserve food for the coming winter. Samuel taught her to handle a rifle, insisting that she needed to be able to protect herself when he was out on the range. They worked side by side during the long summer days, and in the evenings, they shared meals and conversation and growing intimacy. Samuel had never been much of a talker before, but with Zara, words came easier. She told him stories from the books she loved, and he shared his knowledge of the land and the animals. They laughed together, sometimes argued over small things, and learned to navigate the complex dance of two separate people becoming a partnership. One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Zara said, "I received a letter today. Martha brought it when she visited. It is from the matrimonial agency." Samuel felt a flicker of unease. What do they want? They are checking to ensure the arrangement worked out satisfactorily, Zara said. She pulled the letter from her pocket and unfolded it. They want to know if I am safely settled and if the marriage has taken place. What will you tell them? Samuel asked, trying to read her expression in the fading light. Zara smiled and reached for his hand. I will tell them that the arrangement exceeded all my hopes. That I found not just security but happiness. That I am home. The word resonated between them, carrying the weight of that first night when Samuel had told her she was home, and she had been too fevered to fully appreciate it. Now it meant something deeper, something they had built together. You are home, Samuel agreed, lifting her hand to his lips. And so am I, finally. As summer turned to autumn, their life took on a comfortable pattern. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts. Samuel brought in the cattle from the high pastures, preparing for winter, while Zara filled the root cellar with preserved vegetables and salted meat. They made monthly trips to Fort Bridger for supplies and church, gradually becoming known as a couple rather than newcomers. The community accepted Zara, charmed by her Eastern manners softened with growing frontier practicality. In October, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after supper, her hands nervously smoothing her skirt. Already, Samuel said, surprised but clearly pleased. That is wonderful, Zara. How do you feel? Nervous, she admitted. Excited but nervous. I do not know anything about having babies, and the nearest doctor is a full day's ride away. Martha has had 3 children, Samuel reminded her, and there is a midwife, Mrs. Patterson, who lives near Fort Bridger. We will make sure you have everything you need, and I will be right here with you every step of the way. You are not disappointed it is happening so soon? Zara asked. We have been married less than 6 months. Samuel pulled her into his lap, cradling her against his chest. I am delighted, truly. This was part of what I hoped for when I sent for you, a family of our own. Zara relaxed against him, her head on his shoulder. I love you, Samuel Yates. I do not think I have said it plainly before, but I do. Deeply and completely. Samuel felt his heart swell. They had danced around the words, implied them in actions and glances, but hearing them spoken aloud was different. I love you too, Zara. From that first moment when I saw you in the stagecoach, looking so determined even though you were burning with fever, I think I started falling in love with you." They sat that way for a long time, wrapped in each other and in the knowledge that their family was growing. Winter came hard that year. Snow fell heavy and frequent, blanketing the ranch in white and isolating them for weeks at a time. Samuel worked tirelessly to keep the animals fed and sheltered, often coming in from the cold with his face red and frost in his beard. Zara kept the house warm and welcoming, and in the long evenings they prepared for the baby. Samuel built a cradle from pine, sanding it smooth and carving simple designs into the headboard. Zara sewed tiny clothes from fabric Martha had given her, her fingers learning the unfamiliar work. They argued good-naturedly about names, Samuel favoring strong, simple names while Zara leaned toward more literary choices. The baby came in early May, just as the wildflowers were beginning to bloom. Mrs. Patterson arrived 2 days before, having made the journey from Fort Bridger at Samuel's urgent request. Martha came too, settling into the small storage room and taking charge with cheerful efficiency. The labor was long and difficult. Samuel paced outside the bedroom door, listening to Zara's cries with his heart in his throat. He had faced charging cattle and broken horses without flinching, but hearing his wife in pain and being unable to help nearly undid him. Finally, near dawn, he heard a different cry, the sharp, indignant wail of a newborn. The bedroom door opened and Martha emerged, tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said, "and Zara is fine. Come meet your boy." Samuel entered the room on shaking legs. Zara lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat and her face pale with exhaustion, but she was smiling. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was the smallest person Samuel had ever seen. "Samuel, meet your son," Zara said softly. "I thought we might call him Thomas after my father." "What do you think?" Samuel knelt beside the bed and looked at the tiny face, red and scrunched, wisps of dark hair plastered to the small skull. His son. His and Zara's son. The reality of it overwhelmed him. "Thomas is perfect," he managed, his voice rough. "He is perfect. You are perfect." "Thank you, Zara," she laughed weakly. "Thank me. You had the easy part." "Then thank you for being so strong," Samuel amended. He kissed her forehead gently, "for giving me everything I never knew I needed." Thomas proved to be a healthy, vigorous baby with strong lungs and his mother's dark eyes. The household revolved around him for the first weeks, with Samuel taking on even more of the ranch work so Zara could rest and recover. Martha stayed for a week before returning to her own family, leaving detailed instructions about caring for both baby and mother. As spring turned to summer, life found a new rhythm. Samuel would wake before dawn to tend the animals, often taking a moment to look in on Zara and Thomas sleeping peacefully. Zara managed the household with Thomas strapped to her back in the manner she had learned from a native woman who sometimes traded at Fort Bridger. They worked together, played together, and fell into bed exhausted but content each night. 1 year became 2, then 3. Thomas grew into a sturdy toddler with his father's build and his mother's quick mind. The ranch prospered, and Samuel was able to hire a young cowhand named Jake to help with the heavier work. Zara and Samuel talked about having more children but decided to wait until Thomas was a bit older. Life was not without challenges. There were harsh winters that killed cattle, a prairie fire one summer that came terrifyingly close to the house before the wind changed, and periodic run-ins with less savory characters passing through the territory. But through it all, Samuel and Zara faced the difficulties together, their partnership growing deeper with each shared hardship. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Zara to Fort Bridger for a rare evening out. Martha and Tom watched Thomas, allowing the couple time alone. They had supper at the small restaurant that had opened the previous year, a luxury that made Zara laugh with delight at the fancy tablecloths and china. "You ever miss it?" Samuel asked as they lingered over coffee. "Boston, the life you had before." Zara considered the question seriously, as she always did. "I miss some things," she admitted. "The theater, libraries, certain comforts, but I do not miss that life, if that makes sense." That Zara was adrift, frightened and hopeless. This Zara, your Zara, has purpose and partnership and love. "I would not trade what we have built for all the libraries in Boston." Samuel reached across the table and took her hand. "I know I do not say it often enough, but you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You came into my life exhausted and ill, and somehow you became my everything." "Rest now, you are home," Zara quoted softly, repeating the words Samuel had said to her that first night. "You gave me those words when I had nothing left. They have proven truer than I could have imagined. I am home, Samuel. Wherever you are, that is home." They kissed across the table, oblivious to the other diners, lost in each other and the miracle of what they had found together. The years continued to pass. Thomas gained 2 younger sisters, Emma, born when he was 4, and little Sarah 3 years after that. The house rang with children's laughter and occasional tears. Samuel expanded the ranch, buying an adjacent property when the owner decided to return east. Zara started teaching the children to read from her carefully preserved books, and occasionally took in other ranch children for lessons in their main room. They visited Boston once, when Thomas was 10, making the long journey east so Zara could show her family where she had come from. The city astonished the children and reminded Samuel why he had left civilization behind. But it also allowed Zara to stand at her parents' graves and tell them she had found happiness, that their daughter had built a good life despite the hardships. The visit brought her closure and a deeper appreciation for her Western life. When Samuel turned 45, he began teaching Thomas the ranching business in earnest, knowing the boy would one day inherit it all. Thomas proved a natural horseman and quick learner, though he also had his mother's love of books and learning. Samuel and Zara talked about sending him to school in Cheyenne when he was older, wanting him to have opportunities they had never had. Emma was more adventurous, always begging to ride out with her father and brother, while little Sarah, just 5 years old, was content to help her mother in the garden or play with the barn cats. They were each unique, and Samuel loved watching Zara with them, seeing how she nurtured their individual personalities. One autumn evening, when the children were finally asleep and the house quiet, Samuel and Zara sat on the porch as they had countless times before. Zara's head rested on Samuel's shoulder, his arm around her waist. The stars wheeled overhead in their eternal dance, and somewhere in the darkness an owl called. "You remember that first night?" Zara asked quietly. "When you carried me inside?" "Every detail," Samuel said. "I thought you were going to die before morning. You were so small and fragile, burning up with fever. I had no idea what to do except try to cool you down and hope you were strong enough to fight through it." "I remember dreaming," Zara said. "Fever dreams, mostly nonsensical. But I remember your voice cutting through the confusion, telling me I was home. I held onto those words like a lifeline, even when I was not conscious enough to understand them." "You scared me half to death," Samuel admitted. "I had sent for a mail-order bride expecting a capable helpmeet, and instead I got this dying woman I had to nurse. But even then, barely knowing you, I felt responsible for you, protective of you, like you were already mine to care for." Zara turned to look up at him, moonlight silvering her features. "I was yours from that moment. I just did not know it yet. You could have sent me back, told Pete to take me to a doctor in town or back to the agency. But you brought me home and told me to rest, like it was already decided. Like you had already chosen me. I had, Samuel said simply. The moment I saw you, I knew. Does that sound foolish? No, Zara said, tears gleaming in her eyes. It sounds like us, like this whole improbable, wonderful life we have built, two strangers who became everything to each other. Samuel kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, still finding wonder in the fact that this woman loved him, had chosen to stay with him, had built this life beside him. When they finally drew apart, both smiled, the comfortable intimacy of long marriage warm between them. "Come to bed, husband," Zara said, standing and offering her hand. Samuel took it and let her lead him inside, past the bedroom where their children slept, to their own room where they had shared so many nights. As he held Zara close in the darkness, listening to her breathing slow into sleep, Samuel offered a silent prayer of gratitude for that day 15 years ago when a dusty stagecoach had brought him his future. The ranch continued to thrive. Thomas proved as good a rancher as Samuel had hoped, taking over more responsibilities as he grew into young manhood. He courted and married a girl from Fort Bridger, a sweet-natured young woman named Alice, and they built a small house on the eastern edge of the property. Emma surprised everyone by declaring she wanted to be a teacher and eventually left for a women's college in Denver, promising to return and open a proper school in Fort Bridger. Sarah, the youngest, showed talent for drawing and spent hours sketching the landscapes and animals around her. Samuel and Zara, now in their 50s, gradually eased into a less demanding routine. Thomas handled the day-to-day ranch operations with Samuel as advisor. Zara finally had time to indulge her love of reading, often sitting on the porch in the afternoons with a book while Samuel worked on small projects nearby. They had earned their rest, but neither was ready to stop completely. Grandchildren arrived. Thomas and Alice gave them 3 grandsons in quick succession, filling the ranch with new energy. Samuel built a swing from the big cottonwood near the house, and Zara sewed quilts for each new baby. They watched their grandchildren grow with the same wonder they had felt with their own children, grateful for every moment. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch. Thomas roasted a steer, and the women prepared side dishes and pies. Neighbors came from miles around, turning it into a proper celebration. As the sun set and musicians struck up dancing music, Samuel pulled Zara out under the stars. They danced slowly, not caring that they were out of step with the lively tune the fiddle played. Around them, their children and grandchildren and friends celebrated, but Samuel and Zara were lost in their own world. 30 years, Zara marveled. Sometimes it feels like forever, and sometimes it seems like yesterday that I arrived here half dead and terrified. Best 30 years of my life, Samuel said. Every day with you has been a gift, Zara. Even the hard days, the times we argued or struggled, they were worth it because we faced them together. I wish I could go back and tell that frightened girl on the stagecoach what waited for her, Zara said. That the rough cowboy who carried her inside would become her whole world, that she would find not just a home but a love that would sustain her through everything. She would not have believed you, Samuel said with a smile. She would have thought it too good to be true. Perhaps, Zara agreed, but she would have been wrong. It is not too good. It is exactly right. They danced until the music ended, then stood in the darkness, holding each other and listening to the sounds of celebration around them. Their grandson toddled over and Samuel scooped him up, making the child shriek with laughter. Zara watched them, her heart full to bursting. This was what she had traveled across a continent to find, though she had not known it then. Not just a husband or a home, but a whole life. Messy and beautiful, challenging and rewarding, full of love and laughter and the deep satisfaction of partnership. She had arrived exhausted, desperate, and afraid. Samuel had carried her inside and told her she was home. He had been right. She was home, and she had been from that very first moment. As the years advanced, Samuel and Zara settled into a comfortable old age. Samuel's hair went completely silver, and Zara wore reading glasses for her beloved books. They moved more slowly but still took walks around the property on nice days, Samuel pointing out changes and improvements, Zara identifying wildflowers and watching for birds. They sat on the porch every evening without fail, weather permitting, talking, or simply sitting in companionable silence. Emma returned from Denver with a teaching certificate and opened her school in Fort Bridger as promised. Sarah married a photographer from Cheyenne and moved to the city, but she visited often with her husband and their daughter. Thomas ran the ranch with quiet competence, consulting Samuel on major decisions but largely managing independently. When Samuel turned 65, he and Zara made a decision. They would build a small house, just big enough for the two of them, on a rise overlooking the creek. Thomas and Alice would move into the main house, as was proper. The ranch would officially become Thomas's, though it would always be home to Samuel and Zara. The family helped build the small cottage that summer. It had 3 rooms, a main living area with a kitchen corner, a bedroom, and a small storage room. A wide porch wrapped around 2 sides, offering views of the creek and the mountains beyond. It was simple and perfect, a place for Samuel and Zara to spend their final years in peace. They moved in on a golden September day, carrying their few personal belongings. Zara's books, Samuel's tools, the quilts Zara had made over the years, and the cradle Samuel had carved for Thomas so long ago, now serving as storage for yarn and sewing supplies. That first night in their new home, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over land they had worked and loved for 4 decades. "It is strange," Zara said, "starting over again in a new house after so many years." "We have started over before," Samuel reminded her, taking her hand. "That first night, you were starting over in a new life. This is just another chapter." "A good chapter," Zara said firmly. "I am ready for some peace and quiet, watching our grandchildren grow, spending time with you without the constant demands of the ranch." "I am not going anywhere," Samuel promised. "Where else would I go? You are my home, Zara, just as much as this land." They lived simply and happily in their cottage. Days passed in gentle routine. Breakfast on the porch, walks by the creek, visits from children and grandchildren, quiet evenings reading or talking. Samuel's hands grew too stiff for heavy work, but he kept busy with small projects, always making something for the grandchildren. Zara's eyes weakened despite her glasses, but she still read every day, sometimes asking Samuel to read aloud when the light was poor. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the family gathered again, though the celebration was smaller and quieter than the 30th had been. Samuel and Zara sat in chairs of honor while their children and grandchildren toasted them, sharing favorite memories and expressions of love. Emma stood to speak, graceful in her teacher's confidence. "My parents taught me that true love is not just passion and romance, though they had plenty of that. True love is partnership, choosing each other every day, working together through good times and bad. They showed me what marriage can be when 2 people are truly committed." "Thank you, Mother and Father, for that example." Thomas spoke next, his voice thick with emotion. "Father taught me to work the land, to care for animals, to be a man of my word. But the most important thing he taught me was how to love my wife by watching how he loves Mother." He showed me that strength includes gentleness, that provision includes presence, that being a man means honoring your woman. I hope I have lived up to that example." Sarah finished, tears streaming down her face. "When I was little, I thought everyone's parents loved each other the way mine did. As I grew older, I realized how rare and precious it was. Mother and father, you gave us the gift of security by showing us a love that never wavered. We never doubted we were wanted or that our family would endure. That is a treasure beyond measure." Samuel held Zara's hand throughout, both of them weeping openly at their children's words. When the speeches ended, Samuel stood slowly, his joints creaking but his voice still strong. 40 years ago, I was a lonely cowboy who wanted someone to share his life. I sent away for a mail-order bride, hoping for companionship and help. Instead, I got everything. Zara arrived exhausted and ill, and I carried her inside and told her she was home. I meant this ranch, this place. But what I learned is that home is not a place. Home is a person. Zara became my home, and I hope I became hers. Everything good in my life, everything I am most proud of, comes from that day when I carried her through that door and our life together began." He turned to Zara, who was crying in earnest now. "You are still my home, my love. After 40 years, you are still the first thing I think of when I wake and the last thing I see before sleep. You are still the person I want to tell everything to, whose opinion I value above all others. I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every year, every challenge and joy. All of it, as long as it was with you." Zara stood and embraced him, and their family cheered and applauded. The celebration continued into the evening, but Samuel and Zara slipped away early, walking slowly back to their cottage hand in hand. "That was quite a speech," Zara said as they settled on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the cooling night. "I meant every word," Samuel said. "I am not good with words usually, but some things need to be said." "I love you, Samuel Yates," Zara said, as she had said countless times over 40 years. "My rough cowboy who turned out to have the tenderest heart." "I love you, Zara Yates," Samuel replied as he had replied countless times. "My mail-order bride who became my everything." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one, the same stars they had watched for 40 years from different porches on the same land. The creek murmured its endless song, and somewhere a coyote called, answered by another from across the valley. Samuel and Zara lived several more good years in their cottage, surrounded by family and the land they loved. They celebrated birthdays and holidays, welcomed new great-grandchildren, and watched their family tree grow and branch. Their love, which had started with a desperate gamble and a fevered arrival, had created a legacy that would endure for generations. When Samuel passed peacefully in his sleep at 72, Zara mourned deeply, but also celebrated a life well lived and a love fully realized. She stayed in the cottage, refusing to move despite her children's concerns, saying she felt closest to Samuel there. She would sit on the porch and talk to him, certain he was listening, telling him about the grandchildren and the ranch and the wildflowers by the creek. Zara followed Samuel 2 years later, dying in her sleep in the bed they had shared, a peaceful smile on her face. Her children found her with one of Samuel's old shirts clutched to her chest and a letter on the bedside table addressed to them. The letter spoke of love and gratitude, of a life that had exceeded all expectations. She thanked them for being the kind of children who made parenthood a joy. She asked them to remember that love was worth any risk, any hardship. And she told them not to grieve too much, because she was going home, back to the rough cowboy who had carried her inside so many years ago and told her she was home. They buried Zara next to Samuel on the rise overlooking the creek. beneath the mountains they had both loved. The whole community attended, testament to the lives they had lived and the impact they had made. Emma read from her mother's favorite book of poetry. Thomas spoke of his father's integrity and his mother's strength. Sarah displayed a drawing she had made years before, showing her parents sitting on their porch, looking at each other with the same love they had shared for over 40 years. The ranch continued, passing through the generations, always called the Yates Ranch no matter who held the deed. The cottage remained standing, carefully maintained by the family, a memorial to the love that had started everything. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would visit it, hearing the story of how their great-grandmother Zara arrived exhausted and sick from the east, and how their great-grandfather Samuel carried her inside and told her she was home. It became family legend, that story, told and retold, growing slightly with each telling but always true at its core. Two strangers who became partners, who became lovers, who became everything to each other. A desperate woman and a lonely man who found in each other exactly what they needed. A mail-order bride and a rough cowboy who built a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The land remembered them. The creek still murmured the same song. The mountains still stood guard over the ranch. And on quiet evenings when the wind was right, people swore they could see two figures sitting on the cottage porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, still together as they had always been, would always be. Home at last, home forever, home together in the land and love they had claimed as their own.